Welcome to the Play Podcast with me, Douglas Schatz. Hello, and welcome to episode 59 of the Play Podcast, where we explore the greatest new and classic plays. I'm Douglas Schatz, founder and host of the Play Podcast. As the curtain rises, we meet Gabriel, who has spent much of the day asleep lying on the sofa, venturing out only to the corner shop. This is not an unusual day for Gabriel. Her younger sister, Baby, returns exhausted from a long day at work in a clothes shop. Their situation seems somewhat dispiriting, but Gabriel will shortly take an initiative that will dramatically change their fortunes. She signs up to a pyramid selling scheme, promoting a range of essential oils that promise to soothe the myriad of life stresses. And unexpectedly, she becomes a shooting star in the all-female sales team. Gabriel and the other women who come together to sell the Paradise-branded products hope that they will find cures to the challenges in their own lives through their roles as Paradise representatives. The road to Paradise is not so sure and smooth, however. This is the world of Margaret Perry's scintillating new play, Paradise Now, which, as we record this episode, has just concluded an acclaimed run at the Bush Theatre in London. The Telegraph said it might well be the best new play of the year, and I very much hope that the production may find an extended life, because as you're about to hear, the play is an extraordinarily perceptive, funny, and moving exploration of the search for self-worth and connection in our fractured world of social media and short-term success. Margaret Perry, like some of the characters in her new play, is originally from Cork in Ireland and now lives in London. Her debut play, Porcelain, was picked from the unsolicited script pile and produced by the Abbey Theatre in Dublin in 2018. Porcelain masterfully interweaves the story of a new mother in London in 2017 battling postnatal depression with the famous 19th century Irish tale of Bridget Cleary, whose husband murdered her, claiming that she'd been taken by fairies. Her second play, Collapsible, started life at the Volts Festival in London in 2019, going on to win awards at both the Edinburgh and Dublin Fringe Festivals, followed by a successful run at the Bush in 2020. I'm happy to declare a personal interest in Margaret's work, because we were proud to publish Porcelain at Samuel French when I was there. So I'm delighted to be able to welcome Margaret to the podcast to talk about Paradise Now. Hi, Margaret. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I read in an interview when Porcelain was published that you said, "I love titles. I never feel I know what a play is until I found its title." So I wonder how you found the title for Paradise Now.
Well, yeah, gosh, I forgot I said that, but I do think that. I found it, well, when I was researching these multi-level marketing pyramid schemes, I got kind of obsessed with the big conferences that they have every year. And they're always called crazy things. Like there's one called Limelight Palooza, or, sort of like big, explosive names. And so when I knew that the scheme was going to be called Paradise, I just felt like that had to be the name of the conference. But I like a title with a double or triple meaning. And I also feel like the title is kind of a demand, like Paradise Now, ! And I was quite insistent on the exclamation mark throughout the process. Sometimes it got dropped from the copy on the website, and I would always write and say, "I'm sorry to be this annoying person, but please include the exclamation mark." So it sort of feels like a lot of the characters are grabbing the world by the throat and saying, "Give me paradise now." Like we're sort of in a world where it feels very far away in this late capitalist moment. And so it was kind of that double meaning that I was excited by.
I love the idea of it being an imperative, and we'll talk more about the expectations these characters have. I'm intrigued that you started by saying you were researching these marketing schemes. I mean, what started you on that path? Where does that interest come from?
Well, I read an article in the LA Times in 2018, I think, about Herbalife, which was one of these companies, and how they had taken hold in a working class Latina community. And the article was focused on this one woman. Her sister had enlisted her into this scheme despite knowing that she would go into debt. And instead of passing the debt on, and the debt had been kind of passed around this small community, instead of passing it on to someone else, she called a kind of town hall meeting and said, "Look, this ends with me. the stops here. We all are going to crowdfund to pay our debt to this company, and then we never touch them again. And I found that an incredibly moving story, and it just kind of lived in my head for a bit. Then I started reading more, and these schemes kind of coalesced around things that I was thinking about anyway, like ideas about capitalism and ambition. What really made me be like, this is a play, was when I learned that it's kind of obvious in the structure of the schemes, but basically 3% of people do make money in these schemes at the direct cost of the 97% below them. Like that money literally filters up to that 3%, which is, I guess maybe a bit of a basic metaphor, but it felt like an interesting way to talk about the way our world feels at the moment.
That's fascinating stuff. Before we dive into the play further, Margaret, I wonder if you could give us a very brief introduction to the plot so that listeners who didn't get a chance to see it at the Bush can have some idea about the play as we talk about it. We started off by talking about these two sisters, one of whom gets involved in the pyramid selling scheme. Where does it go from there?
Yeah, so she meets this woman called Alex at her church, and Alex enlists her in the scheme. And then she meets other women who have been enlisted in various different ways. And she enlists someone herself, a young girl from Cork called Carla. And then they all go to this conference. And over the course of the conference, we learn that Gabriel has risen to the top of the ranks and become an orchid, which is the top. So it's like soil, daisy, rose, sunflower, and orchid are the 5 ranks. And this is very common in these kind of schemes. They always have crazy names and many, many levels. And so we learn that Gabriel's become an orchid. Then we learn that she has actually been buying her own stock for the whole year and cheated her way into that and has put herself and her sister in enormous amounts of debt in order to seem like she has been successful. And then from there, their lives kind of fall apart, but also are healed in a different way.
Oh, well, we'll come to what the result is in the end. But one of the joys in the play is the range of different characters who find themselves drawn into and together in this Paradise Enterprise. First, I wanted to ask you, this is a play with only women characters. Did you set out to write a play with only women? And if so, why?
No, actually, I didn't sit down and think I want to play with only women. But when I was researching these schemes, 98% of people who do these schemes are women globally. And they are aggressively targeted at women because women are seen as, and often are, people who have more time on their hands, maybe like stay-at-home mothers in particular. And this sort of language of feminism has been co-opted in order to enlist people into these things like, oh, join and you'll get this big female community of sisterhood and we'll all rely on each other and we'll all help each other. And so, yeah, it sort of became, as I was writing, quite clear that the characters would all be women, but it didn't feel particularly pointed necessarily. It just feels like a world in which men are more peripheral.
It's obviously based on the actual facts of your research, but also, do you think there's a certain vulnerability to the women being targeted and how they're targeted? There's a fantastic line early on where Alex, who's the leader of this small team who starts the recruitment ball rolling for Gabriel, she recruits Gabriel, as you said. She talks about the scheme being for a certain type of dedicated, ferocious woman. And I wondered what that paradigm is. Why does she use that language?
Well, it's funny. You'll think I came up with a lot of this myself, but honestly, so much of it is actually lifted directly from the world of multi-level marketing. So like, it's quite common for language like that to spread like a virus across people who are recruiting and for them to send 100 messages maybe with the exact same phrase in it. And I also feel like that language is used, it's sort of the language of cults as well. It's like, you're not like the others, you're special, and I see something in you. You know, she says, I see fire in you. And that means that you can succeed at this, basically. So I think, yeah, it's language designed to manipulate, really. And it's designed to catch people often at their lowest moments when they don't have much else in their life that's making them feel good. And to say, look, this is something that's going to make you feel good. This is going to introduce you to people who will make you feel special and wanted and give you a place in the world.
Gosh, the more you talk about it in terms of the research, the more pernicious it all seems, doesn't it? How deliberate it is, the language and the targeting. Of course, as you see in the play, each individual, Gabriel in particular, is meant to feel like they're special and that this is something personal about this relationship, when, of course, it's anything but, as you've just described. And also you talked about the idea of women coming together. There's a running theme in the play where Alex talks about being a community of women who lift each other up. And yet at the same time, as you also described in the origins of the whole thing, the scheme creates a competitiveness between the salespeople. There's a hierarchy of results, as you just described as well, but also they're having to recruit other people, potentially in competition with people they've already recruited. And Alex says at one point when Laurie, one of the characters, questions the fact that this could be competitive, Alex says, I don't think it's very feminist to pit women against one another. So I wonder, were you interested in exploring this from some more general ideas about feminism in our capitalist world?
I guess so. I mean, I suppose I'm more interested in the kind of absurd doublethink that is involved with a scheme that says that it's about community when it is actively about competition. And whether those two things can sit next to each other, I think they are just uneasy bedfellows. The other thing about these schemes is that it is very, 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 very hard to make any money in them. And it is rigged like that. It's statistically rigged like that, because the more people that are recruited, the less customers there are, or the more people who are competing for a very small and often dwindling number of customers. Because also the products they sell are often, how many essential oils does a person need? Not that many. So it's more about opportunity than it is about the things they're selling. I wonder if putting the word feminism in the play was a bum steer, because I'm not sure I'm as interested in it from a feminist perspective as just from a human perspective, and these people happen to be women.
Well, actually, when she says it, there's something funny and ironic about it. So I think I might be overplaying even by picking up on it.
No, I think that Alex as a character, though, is someone who is very obsessed with feminism, who sees herself as a girl's girl and has her girls that she goes for drinks with, and she has like a bag with boobs on it, or, that kind of vibe. And I think I was intrigued by the idea that she would then be the one who was throwing other women under the bus, whether intentionally or not.
She certainly feels like she's a leader of the pack, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She's got some mission she seems to be living. It's interesting. There are various reasons why the different women choose to join the scheme. For all of them, as you suggested, it offers some sort of possible route to achieving personal dreams or goals. But the women, I was fascinated, are at different stages of life and have different dreams or needs, of course. We started off with Gabriel and her sister Baby, who are actually in their late 50s, early 60s, which is unusual. The rest of the cast, there are two of them in their 20s, two in their early 30s. And I was struck first, I think, Margaret, partly because I know you, and I feel like this play speaks to the experiences of a certain age of women and society, particularly the late 20s, early 30s, where these younger characters, their goals, their aspirations, and you talked about it in the title, Paradise Now. So Carla, who is 25, has come to London from Cork with her dreams, including trying to get into TV presenting, inevitably, but she's doing odd temp jobs. And she has these fantastic lines, which jumped out at me, where she talks about her disappointment and her impatience at not being further forward with her dreams. Remembering she's 25, I just thought something would have happened by now. Some people go to the right universities and meet cool people who do cool things, and then they graduate and just start doing the thing they really want to do. They get to skip this bit, which is her bit where she's doing the odd temp jobs, not being a TV presenter. And then she says to Gabriel, who's much older, of course, I wish I was your age. I hate being 25, the uncertainty of everything. I just want to fast forward to when it's all sorted out, like when I'm rich and in love and I've got a house and my kids are at university. Now, there's so much in there. Are these views that you think reflect her generation, millennials or Generation Z even?
Oh God, I mean, I wouldn't dare to claim to reflect any views of any generation in general, but I think, Carla, in that speech especially, I'm sort of writing about how I felt when I was 25, like I'm 32 now, and I'm obviously not old, but I've lived some more life, and I realize it's not as simple as that. And I think she is very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and very ambitious. She wants everything, and she just thinks that she's going to get everything. And by the time she's Gabriel's age, or even before, and wants life to be sewn up, and doesn't quite realize that life is in the stitching, right? So I don't know if it's anything to do with Gen Z or that age group that any judgment I'm making. I feel like it's more a general human feeling, and it's certainly how I felt when I was that age, and especially when I'd come from Ireland and I didn't know really anyone in London, and I felt quite outside of the spaces that I was desperate to be in.
It's a very challenging time of life.
Yeah.
I have two children in their 20s, and I think back to my own 20s a long time ago, but where you have hopes and dreams and thoughts about what you'd like to do, but it's very hard to make progress early on. And you often just fall into something for lack of other options or just in practical terms. But if you keep going, maybe you'll get somewhere, but it takes time. But the thing that struck me about this is the time, this impatience. And I wondered whether that's something to do with the generation of the world we live in, of social media and the X Factor world, where it creates expectations that anyone can achieve this extraordinary dream and really fast. Overnight, you can have millions of followers as an influencer or, win the X Factor. And it creates this kind of idea that we're all special or that we can be special and that specialness will be recognized. I don't know, this seems a little bit unrealistic. It's pretty narcissistic and it creates unrealistic expectations, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's all those things. For me, it feels like it's more of a function of extreme youth than of anything else. I mean, I don't know if in social media that you could, I suppose there is an expectation, probably more so than there was 10 years ago, that being on the internet can lead to success or fame and fortune.
Doesn't it change the kind of views one might have about the work you do and the nature of work and how long you have to work at it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this line, I Love Girls, the TV show, and I've been rewatching it recently, and I'm thinking about this one episode where one of the characters is talking about these two women she really admires and wishes she could be like. And she says, they're amazing. They do nothing and achieve everything. And I sort of feel like there's something in the way that maybe some young people, I don't want to say young people because I sound 1,000 years old.
You're young.
I am, but I'm not, I didn't have the internet when I was a teenager. So I don't know, really. I think that Carla, maybe she is a typical Gen Z in that way. Like, I think she definitely has an expectation of things happening quicker. Like, she's like, I've been here 6 months, as if it's a really long time. And it's the blink of an eye. But the thing is, 6 months does feel like a very long time when you're that age and when you are so desperate to get going on the thing you want to get going at. And you feel like nobody will let you. And I think one of the great things about social media as well is that it takes away the gatekeepers. Like, if you want to be a comedian, you can get a TikTok and make funny videos, and that a lot of comedians in the last few years have got their start that way, and I think that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think you're right that there's obviously an openness and a freedom in that sort of marketplace, and there's a fabulously entrepreneurial attitude and energy underlying these individual aims and getting out there and doing it. And also the timescales. I mean, gone is the generation where you signed up for a job and that was it for life. Clearly, I met with someone at Christmas, some younger people, listen to me, who were saying, they've been in their job 3 years and that's way too long. So clearly the timescales we're working on are different. But it's interesting you say you're not a social media person, because I think the play is very perceptive about social media. Carla's generation have grown up living in the full-on world of social media.
Yes, yeah.
And there's a phrase that came to mind when thinking about this, is living out loud. I think it has several meanings, but if you're thinking even literally, it seemed to me it means broadcasting your life, conducting it in the public eye, performing even always. So I wondered what you felt about that aspect of the social media, about living out loud and its perils or not.
Yes, well, I suppose there's a thread in the play in which Carla has one thing she doesn't want to share with her social media followers, which is her sexuality. And Anthony, her partner, thinks, what's the big deal? Just put it out there. No one cares. It's 2023. But Carla feels it's too precious to share. And then I guess by the end of the play, she has succeeded in the scheme in part because she relented and decided to share. And I don't want that moment to feel like a win. And Aola Smart, the brilliant actor who played Carla, always played it so beautifully. You feel in that moment that Carla has lost something in the pursuit of her dream. So I have a mixed relationship with it. I think I share some of my life online, sure. But I think sharing every single thing you do online is deeply, I don't want to say psychotic, but it's make me feel ill to do that.
I think it could create psychosis in a way because it's not really real and it becomes somewhat obsessive. And it's clearly, we've talked about it being performative. So how real is that? And it's, of course, selective. It's interesting to talk about the merging of the professional and personal. I've always had some question about whether you can keep some of these things separate. So a professional identity on certain platforms and a personal one on others or not, or do you have different Twitter accounts or, all that kind of thing. And then play, there's some discussion about that. Carla and Anthony, they have this disagreement about how honest to be about her sexuality. And as you say, ironically, when she comes out, the number of her social media followers goes through the roof. But then on the other hand, there's an argument between Laurie and Alex. Alex at one stage puts up that she's had a panic attack. But this is in her professional profile, right? So she's sharing this pain in some way. And Lori challenges her that she's exploiting this personal pain. So there's a real argument there as to whether you should be honest. Is this being more honest, or is this still not really honest? This is dishonest in a different way.
Well, I think there's an important distinction to make between sharing your life online because it makes you feel good and you want to do it and it helps you connect with people, which I'm all for. And it's something I do and something many of my friends do.
Yeah.
And sharing it with the goal of making money. And it feels like that's where it feels uncomfortable to me in terms of the commercialization of vulnerability. But then you could also say that that's empowering in some way for Alex and for people who watch that video and who do get something from it. So I would never come down on it one side or another. And I'm interested in the kind of person that's able to do that. Like Alex really can read the room of the internet. She understands the assignment of the job that she has, and she carries it out skillfully. And Laurie is someone who cannot read a room and does not understand the assignment of any moment. And that's why, I guess, as a character, I love her so much, because she is completely pure and unabashedly honest in a way that people don't respond to because it's not packaged.
Well, it's interesting, the question about how honest one is. I mean, either way, one is editing whatever one's putting out, right? You can't put it all out there. So you are selecting and choosing what you put out there. And as you say, in this context, it's for a purpose. And Lori nails it by saying that what Alex did was literally valuable. She was putting a price on her pain in that respect because she was doing it to generate some kind of effect that would help her in her professional pursuits.
Yeah.
It's a complicated area, as you touched on in the play, which I think is fascinating.
You could also argue that writing a play is something similar to what Alex does, you know? Taking your pain and trying to spin it into gold. It's not that different. I mean, you make less money. But I mean, Alex probably doesn't make very much money either. So I don't know. I'm sort of skewering myself as much as anyone.
That's fascinating. The other instinct was you saying that Carla doesn't win by being honest necessarily like this, or the way she engages with social media, because isn't there a point, I think, between her and Anthe that it just becomes a bit all consuming, doesn't it? So that she's actually not really living in this world. She realizes that she doesn't have real life friends. Anthe goes out and sees people and does things. And this ultimately ends up in them splitting up because they are engaging with the world differently. And there is that danger, isn't there, that this kind of living online, living out loud, is dangerous in itself too, if it becomes all consuming.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was more that Carla becomes corrupted by the scheme, by Alex and by the others. She gets this narrow idea of what success looks like, what a successful person is. And she decides very cruelly that that doesn't include her girlfriend. And that's a kind of terrible and painful moment in the play, I think, where, again, it's the cost of what she's done sort of bites her, really.
Exactly. And Anthe, her girlfriend, is an interesting contrast because she starts off being relatively skeptical about the scheme, and I think about being absorbed by social media as well. And as you say, there's this terrible moment when she overhears Carla talking disparagingly to Alex about her not having the kind of drive that she has. And there's this very specific kind of drive she has in mind, this being this ferocious, determined woman. And in fact, the irony of that with Anthe is that she actually does have that drive.
Absolutely. I mean, just before that scene, we see her do this incredible audition where she's just an extraordinary dancer. We see the drive, we see the ambition. She just doesn't present it the way that Carla does, which is upfront about it all the time.
Yeah, but she's also doing it in a different sphere and has a different attitude. Just to be clear, she's a dancer and she goes to repeated auditions through the play, most of which it looks like she's not successful and she's just one of very, very many, but she keeps at it. And one of them where she does it very well. And there's a smile on her face where she just knows she's done it well. Mm-hmm. Whether she gets the part or not, she does it because she's good at it and feels good about herself doing it. And she also has a more realistic understanding that it takes time. Goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
This is graft that you have to put in the real world as well, by contrast to what's going on online with Carla. I wanted to ask you about the Paradise proposition that satirizes our focus on well-being, for example. Most obviously in these products, as you said, all these essential oils. I love early on, Gabriel shows baby a sample of the so-called essential oil, and she says, it doesn't seem particularly essential. Are you having a go at our search for well-being, or is it just this industry?
I think the oils themselves are not the problem. I was quite careful to include some moments where there's like genuine pleasure and relaxation coming from the oil. So like when Gabriel massages baby's temples and she says heaven, and then when Laurie gets so relaxed by the oils that she slides off her chair. The oils themselves, great, love them. But it's more about the way in which they're sold and the system in which they're bought and sold that is a kind of exploitation of that desire for well-being. And the desire itself isn't the thing, is it? It's like the capitalist industries that spring up around it that make us feel like we need to spend money to feel relaxed.
So some of them work and some of them are snake oil. You're sold things that, as you say, some of which seem to have a salutary effect, but in some others you think so. One of my favorites in the play is called Essential Abundance. This oil apparently attracts prosperity and peace. I love the verb attracts. I'm not quite sure how it does that, Margaret.
Well, honestly, I mean, yeah, there's an essential oil company called Young Living who have an oil called Finance, which is supposed to award good financial energy into your life. It costs $40 for like 10 mils of this oil. So if I put that in the play, it'd be too on the nose. A lot of this stuff it's real, like it exists and it's real, and you're probably giving me too much credit for it. But again, it's like if people want to get pleasure from essential oils, and if people want to sniff an oil and think this is going to attract peace, I think that's lovely. I think that's really nice. I just feel like with these schemes, it's not about the product, it's about the structure of this scheme. They're selling opportunity, the vague concept of opportunity. And sort of as a sidebar, there's a product. And the product is the only thing that makes it legal. And what separates these schemes from an actual pyramid scheme is that there's allegedly a product that is being bought and sold. But so often, as we see in the play, the actual product ends up in boxes in people's houses. And so what they've bought is an access to a community and access to a feeling. It's like sort of the buying and selling of a feeling, really, which I'm very interested in.
It's interesting. You reminded me when you're saying that none of this is made up. I'm not saying none of it, actually. Sorry, take that back. That some of this is not made up. Of The Handmaid's Tale, which Margaret Atwood has famously said, it all exists somewhere in the world, which makes all of it even more scary, of course. I loved also all the scenes. You talked about these conferences you became interested in. So these scenes in the second act of the play take place at the Paradise Now conference. And I thought it was a fantastic parody of corporate culture and branding. Anyone who's been to any of these things, these scenes are excruciating because they're so embarrassing and recognizable and revealing. Have you been to one of these conferences? How did you pick up this so accurately?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's brilliant.
I listened to this amazing podcast called The Dream. If anyone's interested in MLMs, they should listen to it. And that has a conference episode called Destination Amazing, in which one of the reporters goes to this conference as an undercover. She sort of joins the scheme in order to go and then investigate what's happening. So yeah, I got a lot from that. And also, I mean, we've all been to sort of a kind of airless, soulless hotel conference at some point.
Yeah.
Very sort of, I guess, quite a recognizable situation.
Destination Amazing. That's another one of those great names. Fantastic.
Yeah, can't take credit for that. Season 1 of The Dream. It's a great podcast.
I love that. There's a great scene when they arrive in the hall at the conference for the rousing keynote address by the American CEO. Now, did you make that up, CEO?
No.
Ah!
I did not. And I wish I did. And it always gets such a big laugh. And I'm like, oh, if only that was me, but it isn't.
Well, you put it in the right place. One of the things I loved about that scene is that the 6 women are sitting in a row of chairs at the front of the stage facing us in the audience, as if they're facing the stage in the auditorium. And the CEO's speech reverberates around the theater. And I wondered why you set the scene up that way, staged it that way.
Well, that would actually be a question for the director, I have to say. So Brilliant Jazz Wilcox-Stewart and Rosie Elnile, who was our set designer, they did a workshop around the staging of the play, and what emerged from that workshop was that because when I wrote it, I had pictured actually that we're looking at Fiona Franks and we're looking at the backs of our 6 that we're following. But what emerged from that workshop was that it was much more interesting to see the faces of our characters, and that actually we don't care about Fiona Frank. She could be anyone really, and we don't actually need to see her, which is where this idea to make it into a voice. There was a draft of the play where it was a video link, like a Zoom, and we had her saying like, oh, I wish I could be here with you all, from LA kind of thing. And it just didn't work. And I think what Jazz and Rosie found is, works so much better.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, the disembodied voice, it could be anyone. It becomes therefore even more cliched. And you watch, you're acutely tuned to the reactions of the characters because all you have is their faces to judge that by. There are several other fabulously theatrical set pieces, which again, maybe you had nothing to do with, Margaret. I don't know, but I'm sure some of it.
Well,
there's a scene where the Motley Paradise team go bowling on a team building outing, and you actually have women rolling bowling balls across the stage. I don't know whether you designed that.
No, I mean, that's in the script. I wanted them to bowl, and bless Jazz and Rosie, they went for it. And they actually bowled, and that was, a really joyous scene to watch. To have the actual balls and the shoes, and I suppose part of the design idea was that the hotel could be a conference hotel, or it also could be one of those bowling alleys that has like ugly carpet,
Yeah. It's a crazy scene. Wonderful. And then even more dramatic, the 6 members of the team actually build a human pyramid on stage themselves. The cast have to get on top of each other.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's a pretty serious challenge for the actors and certainly nerve-wracking for us to watch. Did you create that scene, and why did you create that scene?
Yeah. I mean, that was in the script from the beginning. And we actually did that on day 2 of rehearsal with an amazing movement director called Ioli, who worked with the actors to get them comfortable. And it was a challenge, but it came off beautifully, I think. I think there's so much in the play about women lifting each other up metaphorically. And I thought, what if they tried that literally? I also really wanted Gabriel to have a moment where she was like, I want to be on top, actually, even if that doesn't make sense. That's what I want. And I'm going to climb on top of these people in order to get there. And I mean, it's probably very on the nose, but it just felt also fun to have a pyramid shape in a play that's sort of about pyramid schemes, and that word is never mentioned. And at no point is the word human pyramid ever mentioned, but basically they just start doing it. And I'm very interested in physical threat to the characters. There's a lot of moments of physical threat and injury scattered across the play, which feel for me are about the way in which capitalism asks us to put our bodies on the line all the time in various ways. Basically kind of uses us up and spits us out, in a way what work feels like much of the time, even though it can be very fulfilling. And I'm lucky to have a job that does fulfill me. But so, there's those kind of ideas, I guess, hovering around.
Interesting. It's metaphorically very rich and also literally dangerous, as you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And Gabriel, who in the casting happens to be, I think, the largest woman, wants to be on the top of this pyramid. And inevitably, of course, it has a very brief life and collapses. The other thing about the corporate parody I thought was fascinating and I really recognized was this sort of unrelenting positivity. As you mentioned earlier, it's almost like joining a cult, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's something dangerous about that, of course, as we know about cults, isn't there?
Yeah, but I think in life there's a sort of cult of positivity often, like painful and difficult feelings are not really encouraged to be expressed. And if they are, we ask, as Alex does, to express them in a certain way that feels neat and that feels sanitized, I think. And so Laurie, with her kind of naked, unmanageable grief, doesn't have a place really in the play or in the world at the moment that we find her. She can't do any of it. And she's not ashamed of that. That's just how she is.
It's interesting because I was talking about it in a corporate sense, this unrelenting positivity, but you're right. It is obviously more general in that in all the social media models that we see, there's not much room for doubt, for example.
No, but I am also fascinated, as you say, in the corporate sense. I did work for a door-to-door selling company once, and they do send you texts that say like, hey, you got this, and all this, It's like polishing a turd, it's like putting a gold star on top of a heap of crap. It's like, okay, you're telling me to be positive when I look around and objectively the thing that I'm doing is unpaid and really hard and like almost impossible to achieve.
There's an interesting balance, isn't it? Because Alex, as you said, sends morale boosting texts to the team like there is something inside you that is greater than any obstacle. You're going to tell me you lifted that from somewhere too, aren't you?
Yeah, do you know what? I literally have a magnet on my whiteboard that says it. And I actually quite like that as a phrase. I think it's quite a nice phrase, but it's only when it's used in this context.
Yes. You're right about it creating the false reality because people understand the gaps between the talk and the truth.
Yeah.
And that actually paradoxically leads to the reverse, a lack of trust in the company or whatever's being said to you, surely.
Well, definitely, yeah.
Actually, it reminded me personally, I've worked in a couple of companies that had US offices, for example, and there was a fascinating difference between the US cultures and the UK cultures in this respect. The US had unbridled enthusiasm and was relentlessly positive and very personal, whereas, of course, the UK were so buttoned up and almost cynical even. So they didn't want to participate in any of the kind of rousing cultural performances that went on.
Well, I think cultural performance is a good way to put it because, like, I feel like we should be expected to do our jobs well, but we should not also be expected to smile about it all the time.
I was going to say you're very English. You're Irish, of course, but this is not North American.
Yeah.
The other thing is there is something positive, obviously, in the energy and the positive thinking that goes on that means that you might actually get further than you might otherwise. So that slogan, there's something inside you that is greater than any obstacle. There's something in it, I guess.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's one of the things in the play which Gabriel does benefit from the scheme. She might lose everything, but she gains a sense of confidence in herself.
Yeah, that's a great segue because I was going to start to ask you about some of the characters in a little more detail, and Gabriel in particular, about what she's looking for from this scheme and in her life. What is she seeking?
I mean, she's seeking to feel special. She's seeking meaning and community and purpose, all the things she doesn't have in her life at the moment. And I think to a certain extent, she gets some of those things for a little bit.
She does. Her story, it's fascinating and energizing in a way, and then heartbreaking as well, because she does find some self-worth in the success that she has and the approbation she gets from her colleagues, and in particular her sister. That relationship with her sister changes, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, I think we find Baby and Gabriel in a very codependent kind of really painful place where they have this parent-child dynamic that they can't seem to break. And Gabriel says, if you stop treating me like a child, and then she says, stop acting like one. And Gabriel says, I'll stop acting like one, that exchange. And that does change throughout the play. And I think Gabriel does become, because I'm interested in the idea that it's very condescending to tell someone they're being exploited if they feel they're being empowered. Empowerment is personal and empowerment is about how you experience something. So I'd never wanted this to be a play which was sort of sneering look at these women who, oh God, what suckers they are. Because actually Gabriel, I think, despite, at the end they lose their home and they have to leave London. Like it has big consequences for their lives. But at the end, she's brighter. She feels like she's more capable. She feels like she feels like more of an adult. Their relationship feels like an adult to adult relationship, whereas at the start, I think it does feel like a parent and a child.
And ironically, it's the inverse of what it should be because Baby's the younger sister.
Yeah.
So Gabriel feels even more guilt, I think, about that because she's not contributing generally and she's not engaged with the world. She's suffering depression, it would seem to me. And yes, breaking that is a hell of an achievement, and we're pulling for her. So you're right that she's not just a sucker. And Baby, that relationship, she's looking after her older sister who's been incapacitated by depression. That would be hard to face and carry. Baby has no confidence that Gabriel will succeed in anything. And she says that outright. There's a really hard moment, isn't there, where she says, I know you better than anyone. And I know that whatever this is that you're doing, it will fall apart, just like everything you ever do falls apart. And yet, when Gabriel starts to succeed and you watch Baby having some pride in her and really starting to believe in her, that's fantastic. And some of that survives.
It does, yeah, because that moment, in a way, it's very cruel, but she's also right. It does fall apart. And I think it's probably come from a history of experience between the sisters before the play, where Gabriel has maybe tried other things like this before. So I think Baby she's just learned from bitter experience. And I think she just feels, she's afraid. She wants to try and stop her. And the way she tries to do that is cruelty. And obviously that only motivates them more. Because when we're underestimated, that's when we feel, I think, are most motivated. So in a way, almost that helps Gabriel succeed for a little bit. I know she doesn't succeed ultimately.
But it fuels her, it drives her a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think she wants to show her sister this world that she's become part of and these friends she's made and this kind of life she's making for herself. And Baby just thinks, well, none of that's real, And they're both right.
Yeah, Gabriel pushes back and she is right in some ways. It's all the more heartbreaking, I suppose, when Baby starts to believe and then it comes crashing down. And there's this extraordinary, brave, and moving scene after the revelation of Gabriel's failure when Baby undresses and gets into a bath that she had several of the unsold bottles of oil to. But she does this in real time in a real bath. And this seemed to me a risky and very powerful scene. And I wondered where the idea of this came from. Was this yours and or the director? And what is the purpose of that scene?
Why do you think it's risky?
It takes quite a long time. It's in real time, right? And I don't know, I suppose leaving that much time, things happening that slowly on stage is a risk. It reminded me, I suppose Annie Baker does this, doesn't she? And I know you're a fan of Annie Baker's. Because things just go in real time and she's willing to take that risk, that our attention will still be there.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. I mean, I guess from that perspective, probably is. And I guess so is the scene earlier in the play when they're all settling down to sleep. But I think me and Jazz, the director, found this kind of pace in the play where it was relentless and then it was slow and then it was relentless again. And I think that kind of felt like the way life feels, I guess, and also the way time passes sometimes. So it felt right at that moment. The scene came about because I thought, I love when the action of something contradicts the emotion that's being felt. So the idea of like an angry bath felt quite fun to me. Because you say bath, you think relax, but a baby having a bath in a furious way, and I guess ultimately a devastated way, felt like the right thing for her to do at that moment. She's also such a character who wants to use stuff. She wants to make sure nothing is wasted. The idea that they have these oils and what are you supposed to do with these oils? You're supposed to use them to relax. So she's like, well, okay, then that's what I'm going to do. And it obviously doesn't work because she's so upset. But I find that moment moving. I do. And afterwards, when they dress her, I find really moving. That was all Jazz's idea.
Yes, that's right. Well, it's fascinating you say that. It's rich because there is the anger and the desolation at the same time, isn't there? And it's a very ordinary moment and brave and naked. You know, I mean, no pretension there at all. The emperor's new clothes are gone. What about Alex? We talked a bit about her before, but she appears to have drunk the paradise Kool-Aid, and everything seems to be working for her in this scheme. She's always, as we said, ultra positive and bright and encouraging and seems to believe in all of the platitudes that she comes out with. She says them with complete conviction. But there's more to her than that, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that she is someone who has very comfortable life circumstances. Maybe didn't always, but she has this husband and this nice house and a kind of sense of financial security and probably a sense of relative emotional security as well. So that enables her to throw herself into the scheme and make it her thing. And it's almost like a hobby for her, I think. She doesn't necessarily need the money, even though she's making some money, but what she needs is the community that it brings. And she gets real joy about just having a gang of girls that she can hang out with.
Well, it's interesting, though, that we don't discover until quite a ways in through the play that she actually has a husband and a son. And therefore, as you say, has some financial security potentially. But she works really hard and she has a drive. And this drive is, you know, it's partly that she values the social engagement, but it's also about personal identity to some degree as well, isn't it? This is something she can do herself. She has a point she wants to prove. She's aiming for the top level all the time.
Yeah.
She wants some identity, I suppose, independent of being a wife and a mother. Would that be true?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's a fiercely competitive person. And maybe a hobby is the wrong way to describe it because she approaches it with the seriousness of a job, definitely. But it's more, I meant by that the money isn't why she's doing it.
No, I think there's more to it than that because she also puts herself through stress because she ends up with this panic attack. This is one of the more surprising scenes that reveals her vulnerability. She lies on the floor, has a panic attack, and we think that she's all together, really. You talked about Laurie. In some ways, like you, I think I found her the most mesmerizing, interesting character because, you know, her unhappiness and anxieties are more apparent. She's jumpy in her own skin. She's suffering from some kind of psychological pain. She's slightly off kilter with everything, isn't she? And it's a fantastic performance, by the way, by Rocky Thakur.
Yeah, extraordinary. Yeah.
And we learn later that one of the reasons for why she may be the way she is, carrying this unhappiness and some desperation, because she really wants to succeed at this, because she needs to, because she has found herself in debt. She lost her job because she suffered a personal tragedy and I think is traumatized by grief and stress, isn't she?
Yeah.
And it's just an amazing portrait. You said you feel closest to her in some way?
I don't know if I feel closest to her, but I feel like, I don't know, I don't want to have favorites.
They're all your children.
I love them all equally. No, I think what I love about Laurie is her incredible raw honesty and her absolute authenticity in every moment. And I think what these schemes are not a fan of is they claim they want your real life, but they don't. What they actually want is you to package that up and make it look glossy. And Laurie does not have the ability to do that, doesn't even understand that that's what's required. Not because she's stupid, far from it, because I think she's emotionally the smartest of them all. And I think she realizes what she's got into, and then she's gone because she knows it's a sunk cost.
It's interesting. At times she feels completely out of touch, as you say, doesn't read the emotional tenor of the room or whatever. But there are other times where she actually is very pointed in her challenges to the rationale of what's going on and is right at those moments, I think. It's a very powerful and moving moment when we learn about her personal tragedy, which, as I say, somewhat explains, I suppose, the nature of her character that we've seen up to that point. But then after that, we don't see much of her. We're left worrying, I think, about her. The others worry about her because she just disappears.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, I know playwrights won't usually answer these speculative questions, but what do you think becomes of her? Where is she gone?
Well, I like to think she's somewhere better. That sounds like she's died. I mean, that she's left the scheme and has sort of figured out that she's not going to make money from the scheme and that these women aren't her friends and that actually she's better off trying to find money elsewhere, hopefully trying to get life back on track in as much as she can. I kind of wanted her to just fall out of the play because so many times I feel in life we read stories of people and we hear this tragic story about someone and then they're gone. Like then it's just like, oh, you just never get to find out. And I found that so much when I was researching all these women that I started worrying about, women I've never met, but just stories of women who sounded like they needed something that they were not getting. I'm just wondering if they got that or if they were okay or whatever. So I kind of wanted the audience to worry about her like I did, I suppose.
Well, we definitely worried about her. I'm sort of pleased that you think she's got somewhere better because I think most of the time I'm thinking, oh no, she could even have taken her own life. She's so down at this point. This has been a complete failure. She's walked away from this conference realizing she's not going to succeed at this. She doesn't have what the others have. She doesn't fit in. She's carrying all this debt and this personal tragedy. She seems to be on her own.
I mean, yeah, I think she is. But I also think in a real way, she's the most dedicated and ferocious of the lot. And actually, she'll probably be somehow all right through other means, I guess. That's my feeling anyway.
Well, I'm so glad to hear it. I'm going to think that way now myself as well.
Yeah.
Actually, this positivity is great because it struck me that for all the satire of the Paradise Scheme and the promises that being part of a team of women will help them grow and prosper, in fact, there is a vestige of truth in the mutual support that goes on between the women, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely, I mean, Gabriel, I think, gets some support. I think Carla and Alex form a genuine friendship. And yeah, I think that they do find those things. I guess the play is kind of asking, why can't we have those things outside of capitalism? Where are the structures where care is given and received in those ways that aren't based on ranks and selling and competition, that aren't based on work even at all? And I think we don't really have those places anymore.
Gabriel says of Carla, who she introduced to it, that people just need a bit of encouragement sometimes. And she gives Carla that, and that seems to work for her. And of course, we talked earlier about the self-worth that I think Gabriel finds when, for some period at least, she had the support or approbation of her colleagues. You mentioned earlier the scene of when Baby gets out of the bath, several of the others help her to dress. And at the same time, bottles of oil have been spread all over the floor of the stage, and others come and help tidy them up. And it seemed to me those scenes were a kind of vivid visual statement of the kind of support that they are giving each other.
Yeah, or that they could give each other if things were different. It's a moment of longing and a moment of connection that we wish they could have all the time, I guess.
What about the ending, Margaret? After all the hype and intensity, you talked about pace, highs and lows and fast and slower. After all the hype and intensity of the Paradise sales world, the ending is deliberately slower and low key, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're left with the two sisters getting ready to move out of their flat in London, return to Ireland. They cannot afford to stay. In practical terms, they're at a low ebb, and Gabriel's failure lying between them. So what hope is there in their future? What is there a moral to be taken from where they've got to?
Oh, I don't believe in morals.
I knew you'd say that. Okay. What is their hope in their future?
I suppose for them specifically, the hope is that they'll have a healthier relationship, I guess. And also that Baby has been able for the first time to voice the things she was feeling about Gabriel's. I imagine that perhaps before the play opened, Gabriel had an extremely bad time. And that was very hard for Baby. And I think this is the first time that she's felt able to say, I was really scared. And sort of, as long as you're okay, then I don't mind.
That's a very moving line. She confesses, as you said, that she was really scared. But she hung in there, and Gabriel's definitely better than when we first met her. And as you say, from what had gone on before, probably. And there is an honesty between them. And also something about self-worth, isn't there? Because Baby walks away from her job. She quits her job, and she has this kind of long, slightly surreal speech about her last day at work, but with some defiance.
Well, I feel like she had to leave the job because they're leaving London. And I think she does hate that job, though. Like, it's twofold. She wouldn't leave if they weren't leaving, because she couldn't. But she hates that job. And they didn't give her a card when she was leaving. And it's those little things that break your heart. That's broken her heart, that feeling that no one could even be bothered to get a bit of paper and write, good luck. That's all that she would have wanted. And that she didn't get that has made her feel simultaneously devastated and furious. And I think that that's completely human. And I don't know. What are they going to do next? Not sure.
But she's defiant. Her dream of that last day, she imagines that the whole of the company fails because she's left.
Yeah, can't function without her. But isn't that all of our, like, if we're honest with ourselves, we wish we were that important to the world, that if we were gone, everyone would go, oh my God, where's Douglas? We can't, you know?
No, I've long known that is not true. Go on holiday from work and come back and nothing has changed. They didn't miss me. I was certainly inessential.
But we all are. Well, none of us are particularly essential. Like, it's true. There's this feeling of simultaneously hating the grind of work, but also wanting to feel needed and useful and important that she's grappling with, I guess, in that speech.
Yeah. Well, it seemed to me she came out of it with some strength, and they both did.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And she gets the smashing moment, so that's fun.
Right. Well, thank you so much for talking us through Paradise Now. I wanted to ask you before you go, one of the traditions of the podcast is I like to ask my guests to recommend another play that we might cover on the podcast, or this is just a personal favorite because I love to hear about other plays. So is there a play you'd like to recommend for us?
Yes. Well, so you've mentioned Annie Baker already, but I was going to recommend Annie Baker's John. I don't know if you've already covered it.
No, we haven't.
I thought at length about what play I have a personal favorite. I have so many favorites, but I love John very, very much. And it always reminds me of why I write when I read it.
Tell me about why. I saw it at the National a few years ago. Just remind us what the premise of John is.
It's a couple in their early 30s on the brink of breaking up who go to a B&B in Gettysburg. And they have a sort of ill-fated weekend over the course of which their relationship kind of comes to an end with this B&B owner called Mercius and her friend Genevieve, who's blind. And I guess John, the title is brilliant because John represents many things in the play, but above all, this feeling that John is kind of God in a way, and this feeling that we are all being watched. It's a play for me about religion and the search for meaning more than anything else. And I think quite a lot of my work is also about that in one way or another. So I love it.
Great. Well, thank you for that reminder. I did love it when I saw it. And as I said, it has this amazing pace.
Yes. And it's incredibly funny as well.
Yes, but also that Annie Baker lets things happen in slow time. And it's riveting to watch. We didn't talk about religion. I didn't know this play was about religion too.
Well, I think a search for meaning, I guess. With some of these characters, they're looking for meaning, and that's what brings them to the scheming.
Yeah, and there are a number of false trails there, I guess, when you set out looking for meaning, is what the play may suggest.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Margaret. It's so lovely to see you again, and congratulations on the play.
Thank you.
As the curtain falls on Baby dreaming of lying in the sun, what are the prospects of the team achieving paradise? Maybe they will learn to accept that that is too much to expect, that believing in oneself without constant validation from others, especially those we don't know, and giving and receiving support to those we do is the more likely way to grow, connect, and heal. Thanks for listening. See you next time. There are additional footnotes about this and every other play that we cover in the podcast available to our patrons. Patrons also enjoy exclusive access to the play review, bonus episodes in which I review current productions that I see in my regular theater going. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/theplaypodcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Play Pod and on Instagram at The Play Podcast. Thank you again for listening and for your support. See you next time.